Financial Argument. Follow us on YouTube.
Great to be here, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for being here. Let's start off with, how do you think the economy's doing? We haven't spoken in quite a while. Do you think that we're in a recession right now?
I would say this, nothing is getting any better. In fact, things are getting progressively worse. And we know this by, again, what the Federal Reserve has been floating out there along with other world central banks. That is, they're going to continue the same thing. Look, here we are nearly a decade after the 2008 event, and they can't fix it. All the printing, all the stimulus, all the asset purchases, they're just not working. And I always tell people, if you want to look for a recovery, you need to look at two things, and two things only. And one of them is the labor force participation rate, which remains at a near historic low, and the money velocity, that's the rate at which cash is moving through our economy, also near a historic low. We cannot have, no matter how much sunshine they want to blow up the crack of everyone, it's not going to work without having these two metrics moving higher. It doesn't matter what they tell us, what they try to sell us, what they try to force feed us. We just are not having a recovery here. In fact, things are deteriorating. Look at the inner cities. Look at the social unrest. It's getting worse. It's not getting better here. It's the distortions across the financial spectrum that is killing the middle class. Look, the lower class of people, they're already broke and poor and destitute. These people, it's a very sad state of affairs. And that group of people is already getting larger. You won't hear any of this on the mainstream, but the middle class is the one that's suffering. I think you would agree with me. The middle class is being systematically decimated under the policies. These are done on purpose here. These suppressed interest rates have robbed savers for nearly a decade now, and the Federal Reserve is talking about continuing that even longer, making the economy, quote unquote, run hot. That means allowing inflation to creep in while suppressing interest rates. So the suppressed interest rates are fostering an environment where people can't even earn interest on their accounts to keep up with the rate of inflation. It's grand theft on an awesome magnitude. Now, what is this doing? It's, again, fostering the environment of risk, transferring the wealth that is being stolen from the middle class to the upper echelon of society. This is going to continue to get progressively worse. The bubble in the stock market is being inflated on the back of a debt bubble. These are going to correct to fair value, and people, the middle class, is going to be wiped out here. There's no recovery whatsoever, zero. And all they have done is inflated a debt bubble, which is the greatest threat to humankind because it's going to burst and create a resource problem. It's going to be biblical when this happens. But until that moment, there's opportunities for us to get ourselves on the right track financially. That is, number one, bet against this debt by hoarding a hard asset, and becoming your own central bank, same thing, by hoarding a hard asset. We understand what's going on. It's unbelievable. Deutsche Bank, for example, they just got fined a pathetically small $38 million for admitting to rigging the silver market. $38 million. Is this a deterrent? Of course it's not. And if it's Deutsche Bank, it's all the banks. And they're also manipulating gold. I mean, you know all this. And I'm more than certain that your readers are. Here we have direct proof that it's happening, and no one is held accountable. Investors are not being made whole. So this whole thing, all these distortions that we've all been saying, it's so evident, is now coming to the mainstream, but nothing is being done, Dave. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, you mentioned Deutsche Bank and the fine of $38 million. I mean, that's just a drop in the bucket. I mean, that is nothing compared to what they've done. Do you think, I know there's other banks involved, but this must go all the way up to the central bank. There's no way that it just stops with Deutsche Bank or Nova Scotia or HSBC.
Well, it's interesting the way that you're saying that, because exactly what I have been saying recently. Look, these institutions would not be doing this. They would not be deliberately suppressing the price of gold and silver if it were not for the central banks wanting them to do this, and this is why they got hit with this $38 million fine. You've got to be kidding me. First of all, where's the fine go? And number two, since they admitted to fraud, it's a criminal act. How have the investors, I'm more than certain that a lot of your listeners are investors in gold and silver, how are they being made whole? We're not. And no one opens their mouth, no one says anything because they know nobody will. It's a shame. So if you're sitting here and you're listening to this, start to get the word out there. Share this particular video. Let people understand that, look, we have direct proof of this. You and I, Dave, have been saying this for years, and now we have proof of it. And still, look, nothing's happening. As a matter of fact, silver ended the day lower today in trading. If these things were allowed to achieve their fair value, they would be multiples higher. But again, it comes back to the paper game that the Federal Reserve wants every single person, and they do not want you out of their realm of control. They want to control you by having you in their game, in their paper market, their debt-based economic model. If you're holding a hard asset, you're outside. They don't want you outside. They want to control you. That's what it's all about. That's what this whole thing is all about.
Do you think the Fed, at this point, I mean, they haven't done it all year. They just keep talking about it, about raising the interest rates. Do you think they're going to end up actually raising the interest rates by the end of this year?
It's unbelievable, isn't it, that we keep hearing about it over and over again, and more Fed presidents coming out and saying, oh, it's going to happen soon, maybe this time. We keep hearing the same rhetoric right now. So you're right. December, they keep talking about raising the federal funds rate 25 basis points. Do I think they're going to do it? Well, I'll tell you this. If they don't do it, I think there's going to be a problem because, again, even the Federal Reserve in their last FOMC minutes that were released, I think it was last week, they're starting to be worried about their own credibility. The system itself, Dave, is built only upon confidence in the theory that it will continue working. It's not backed by a hard asset. If it becomes more evident that the Federal Reserve cannot raise rates ever, even one fraction of 25 basis point is 1/4%. If they can't raise the federal funds rate just that much, I mean, there's even more proof to us that we are in no recovery whatsoever here. The market is going to need an infusion of more heroin, this in the form of quantitative easing. The ECB just yesterday, the market was expecting another infusion of maybe lowering interest rates, but Draghi said, hey, you know what? We're going to keep rates the same. The market didn't like that too much. The market wants more drugs. They've done everything to try to prop it up, including companies buying back unprecedented amounts of shares of their own stock to keep it propped up. So is the Fed going to raise rates? I'll tell you something. All I know is this. If they don't do it, they're going to run into a problem of confidence. And the whole thing, again, is built upon the premise that it's going to work on that confidence. So after a decade of money printing, adding digits to a screen, buying assets across the board, and it still isn't working, they can never fix it, Dave. I think you and I have been saying this for years. They cannot fix it. If they could have, they would have done it by now. Once a government colluding with its central bank gets so desperate that this is what they need to do, to resort to a quantitative easing thing, they can never stop. Japan is the poster child for this. So understand, all the central banks are going to do, no matter what they decide to do with the federal funds rate, is going to inflate and inflate and inflate. That's the cycle that we're in right now. It won't stop. They have to continue to fuel the debt bubble or it will burst. It's going to burst either way, but they're making it worse every single week that goes by, that they will not allow the market to achieve fair value, and is going to feel like the mother of all collapses. But all it's going to be is the market achieving a fair value for assets across the board.
Do you think the central bank, do you think they're looking to take on more of the economy, more control of the economy? Because we know the Bank of Japan, they're buying equities. We know the Fed has mentioned that. Maybe they're doing it already covertly. But pretty soon, the central bank is going to be the entire economy. I mean, they're buying
Everything.
treasury bonds. They bought the toxic real estate. If they start buying stocks of companies, I mean, what is left for the people then? What I mean, it makes the whole system makes no sense.
It doesn't make any sense. It's about control. Maybe a year ago, I had done a video talking about this. How the world central banks all of them are buying everything. There's a reason why they're buying everything. ECB is buying corporate debt. Just a couple of weeks ago, I think you're referring to when Janet Yellen said if Congress would allow the Fed to buy stocks, that it would help. Well, you know what? That's fascinating to me because which stocks would they buy? Which company would they help out? Let me tell you something, and I know this to be a fact, although I can't prove it. The Federal Reserve is already buying stocks. They're using dark pools, these private exchanges, to buy the market. There's no doubt about it. I have a friend of mine that I've known for a very, very long time. He worked at the NSA. I said to him, what are they going to do? I said, if the market would just let go, he goes, Greg, they'll buy it all. Well, that's what they're doing now to keep this propped up. We're in the end stages here. We are the end stage, no doubt about it. And let me say something else here, because there's a lot of people out there say, oh, you know, I've heard people like you saying this market was going to collapse many years ago. Nobody, not even those making those idiotic comments, would have ever guessed that world central banks would have done what they've done to the system, that is flipping it upside down, going negative interest rates, a situation where it's not meant to function in, and have a Federal Reserve suppress these rates for so long, creating an environment of distortions of magnitude that is just beyond the belief of anyone that I know of who understands this, and I think you would agree with that. But they're so desperate now that even Janet Yellen's floating out this idea of buying the market here. Now, what else did we find out from Janet Yellen? She's saying unless, and this makes no sense to me, and maybe you can put a perspective on this. For me, Dave, they're saying, well, when Janet Yellen is now saying we need to get, she said this, okay, unless we do what I'm about to say, this is her words, the financial meltdown will leave a permanent scar on the economy. And what she's referring to is allowing inflation to creep in so we all pay more for things, but meanwhile continuing to suppress interest rates. So how? How will that help our economy if all of us are being forced to pay more for everything? Does that make any sense? It doesn't make any sense to me at all. So look, they have thrown everything they can at this economy to try to get it off the ground. It's not going anywhere. So what we can expect here, more than likely, is one of two things. One is they're going to have to do some kind of a new money printing scheme or asset buying purchases or something to a way larger degree than before, like QE, like Magnum, whatever, or the whole thing will implode. Now, we already understand we're at $20 trillion worth of debt here. It took 225 odd years to build the first half of that debt. We have double that under Obama in the last 8 years. Now, in order to sustain where we are, just where we are now, they would have to double the debt again in less time. It cannot be sustained. So that's why we're starting to hear the mainstream starting to float out alternatives like a universal basic income. I believe, Dave, what they're going to do, they understand this is not sustainable. And again, the middle class is being wiped out and targeted for pretty much an extermination. So when the whole thing corrects to fair value and those involved here in assets that have been hyperinflated, when they correct to fair value and become wiped out, we're going to lose. We'll end up being in a Great Depression environment to a very high degree, way worse than the last Great Depression here, and the government's going to step in and they're going to say, hold on, we have a new deal for you. We have a solution, and that is more control, like you referred to before. Obamacare was the first step in getting control of our lives. The next step is going to be the government's going to say, okay, now everything came apart. We're going to allow you a living. We're going to give you a basic income. So then they get to dictate every single aspect of our lives. We're at a pivotal point here, Dave. And if people don't get out there and vote this is exactly what's going to happen if we end up with Hillary Clinton in office.
Greg, I completely agree with you with this universal basic income. I think they floated out helicopter money, and that was a one-off thing, and they realized, that's not going to be enough, and we need something more where we can get people to spend, because I think that's one of the biggest things where they have a problem, is that people, as they're losing their jobs and not making as much money, or just losing their jobs and getting part-time jobs, they don't have the funds to go out and purchase the goods, and they can't control that. They can manipulate all the other numbers like the stock market, the precious metals market, GDP, unemployment, but getting people actually to go out and spend money, that's difficult to do. And we can see that's been a problem for them. And what this does, and like you said, once they do this and they decide to give a certain amount to every single person every month, they have you. Because if you don't do what they say, guess what? Your funds stop. Just like health insurance. You have Obamacare, which is a complete disaster. Many of the co-ops have completely went bankrupt. Insurance companies are heading for the doors. Premiums are rising. You have a penalty if you don't take the insurance. So it doesn't matter which way you go, you lose. And they're just trying to control us in every aspect right now. And if you don't listen to what they say, they pull something. And this is exactly what we're seeing. And you mentioned the elections. Go ahead.
You're absolutely right. Everything you're saying is so clear to anyone that has even one functioning brain cell. But there are so many people out there that believe that a utopian society can be only achieved if the government controls every aspect of our lives or has more control over our lives. I mean, come on. Do people just not read their history books? Have they been that dumbed down? Look, without a free society, we're done. We're absolutely done. We're being forced to buy a product produced by our government right now, which controls a major part of our lives. That is our health care. Look, it's so simple to see what the next few steps are here, and they are trying desperately to get Hillary Clinton into office. She's the status quo. She's going to make sure this follows the same path that they've been on, only worse. We'll get a changing of the guard at the Supreme Court here, more infringement upon our rights and our freedoms, and so many people are willing to give it up. They're just willing to do that because they believe, again, that a utopian society can only be created if the government controls your life. How frankly stupid can people be? But I guess you can never be more surprised. I tell you, it's going to be interesting over the next few months here when we get a new president and to see where this all goes.
Yeah, you mentioned the elections, and we were talking briefly before we started recording about what might happen. And there's many different theories that are out there, but I see two right off the bat. I mean, they keep mentioning Russia cyber attacks. We can see right now if the popular vote, because there's two, I don't think many people realize this, that there's the popular vote coming from the people that's tabulated, and then you have the Electoral College, which is completely separate and apart. And sometimes the two don't work together, where the people say, I want this candidate, but the Electoral College says, oh, no, you're going to take this person, and they vote that person into office. So when you really think about it, do the people actually have a choice? I don't know. I don't know if they really make an impact on the elections, because it's really left to others if it doesn't go the way they want. And if it doesn't go the way they want, let's say, for instance, during the elections, during that evening where everyone's watching, Trump is pulling ahead with the popular vote. I mean, if it's close by 1,000 or 500 or 10,000, people are going to be like, oh, okay, it was close, so the Electoral College said, okay, Hillary Clinton's the winner. But if Trump is ahead by 100,000 or 150,000, and they decide to put Hillary in, I can see the people getting very angry on the streets. I can see that people would be very pissed off because you're not following the will of the people at this point. You're deciding to do something completely different. And I believe that we would then see most likely riots in the street. And I think the government actually would like this. They would like to use force and to declare maybe a state of emergency, martial law within the United States.
They've been preparing for this for a very, very long time. This is why, and I've been yelling about this for years and years now. I ask people, tell me why you believe that the police in every state have been militarized, military weapons, military tactics, military training. They don't even look like police officers anymore. They look like a combat battalion moving into neighborhoods. It's unbelievable. So that it's all about control. This is how the few have controlled the many throughout is the beginning of time. And unfortunately, we're seeing it unfold now, and I think you're absolutely correct. Look, I've been hearing things about, possible National Guard mobilization around the time of the election. I mean, maybe they're getting ready for something. I would not be surprised if the exact scenario that you outlined does unfold. There will be pandemonium and it will be squashed. It will be crushed because this is what they've done to people. They've turned most of the people into people that need to run to safe spaces, people that need to, go hide somewhere. No one's got any guts anymore.
No.
No one is willing to stand up for anything that they believe in anymore. And again, this has been done on purpose. This is why they want to disarm us. I'm telling you, we are marching down a very, very, and I can't stress that enough, very dangerous pathway into a completely different America than what was initially designed. One that will be controlled by the few. Instead of a government of the people and for the people, it'll be a people that are being ruled by the few. And again, it pains me to see how many people are willing to do this. They think that this is the right way. It's shocking. It really is.
I think what's happening here is that with Trump, and right now I'm not really for any candidate because I hear the candidates, I hear what they're saying, and they're not really going to the main issue. And I do believe the main issue is the central bank. I mean, we can talk about, this plan for the economy. We can talk about what's going on in Syria. But if we don't get to the heart of the problem, we can never really solve what's going on in the country. And
No.
I do believe that the central bank causes most of our problems. First of all, I mean, it's not part of our government. It's a private corporation. And they're creating currency out of thin air and loaning it to we the people, which absolutely makes no sense.
I tell you, that concept that you just said is so profound because 99% of people, maybe not 99, maybe 90, understand the exact concept that you just summed up in one paragraph. And you're absolutely right. It is the central banks that are fostering this wealth transfer, that are causing the elimination of the middle class, that are very much an integral part of this control mechanism. And that is why a new system, I am more than certain, in fact, I'm 100% certain that the system we are in is not sustainable. A new one is already in the works. We've seen this before with the collapse of the Soviet Union, just most recently. Maybe some of your listeners are old enough to remember that stuff. I frankly am. I'm an old dude. But this is where we're going here, and you're right. And the issue is, it cannot be fixed, and they're setting it up on purpose. You have the inner cities. That's where it's starting. The poorest of the poor people are feeling the pain right now. You're starting to see them rise up. They're creating a need for some type of a new system with these people at least, and they're seeing how it's working out. Now, when the middle class loses everything, again, when everything corrects to fair value, because that's what's going to happen. It's not really a collapse. It's a correction. But because the distortions are so extreme, it's going to seem like the mother of them all collapses. But all it will literally be is the market doing its one and only job, and that is to determine fair value for assets. So when that happens and everyone is caught off guard, all those people that are in these accounts that only make cash on the long end of the market. I mean, only when the market goes higher. They're going to get crushed, Dave. They are going to get slaughtered, and they're going to lose it all. And they are going to be the ones that are going to look to the government for a solution, and the government's going to offer them one, and that's going to be the end. That's it, period. A new society, a new government, a new system of rules and laws to govern us all. And I'm hoping that well, I honestly almost don't see a way out of it. I really don't. I sit and I ponder this stuff all the time. What can they do? They're not going to give up control. They're not going to give up power. This has been their goal for many, many, many years. They will crush anyone who stands in their way, and that goes back to why the police have been militarized in every state in the union. Why President Obama has tried over and over again to overthrow the Posse Comitatus Act. It's just unbelievable. But anyway, we'll have to get through it, and I guess, rebuild something. I don't know. I think there's a natural selection going on here, Dave. I really do. Those that are going to lay down like sheep, and those that are going to stand up and fight. And I'd be willing to bet that most of your listeners are of the latter, the ones that will stand up and fight.
Let me ask you this. You said when the market corrects to fair value, when this happens, we're going to see most likely the stock market drop. We might even see what happened in 2008. It might even be much, much worse because they propped this up so much that the higher you prop it up, the harder the fall. When this does happen, for those people who are out there every day working, going to their job, 9 to 5, what is it gonna feel like to them?
It's gonna feel like the Great Depression on steroids. There's gonna be nothing left. Everything is gonna come to a standstill. You have to understand that the issue here is not really in the stock market, although it is a major bubble. It's the debt bubble. It's the biggest bubble by orders of magnitude that we've ever seen in world history. It's an asset that can never be paid back. It's basically worthless. And how do we know that the debt is worthless? Because look at the currency. These financial instruments, quote unquote, are paying negative. They're paying negative. You've got to be kidding me. So again, because the debt is in such a bubble, I want people to think about what I'm about to say. Every trade, whether it's holding a stock or holding a bond or selling a house, you have to have two sides. You have to have a buyer and you have to have a seller. At one particular point, the bond market is going to sell off rapidly and yields are going to spike rapidly. So why would someone want to buy a bond that is only yielding, let's say, 1.7% when they can go into the market and buy it with a much higher yield? So that we're going to end up with a liquidity problem. We're going to end up with a one-sided market where people are willing to take anything for their debt, which is essentially worthless. There's not going to be two sides of a trade anymore. When that happens, the currency becomes massively devalued, and bond yields can go into the stratosphere like we can't even conceive. I don't know, what would the 10-year yield be in a worthless environment? I mean, it's just unbelievable. It could be in the thousands of percent. Then all of this cash will rush out of the bond market as people run for the door, but there's going to be no takers on the other side. When that happens, again, as bond yields spike in the same way that these low yields have inflated a stock market bubble, it reprices everything. Every single asset, including a home, derives its value from what is occurring in the bond market. So if the bond market sells off rapidly, yields spike to who knows where, the stock market will be melted down, and within a matter of a very short period of time, it could lose 90% of its value. I mean, you can't even speculate. No one can. But all of this cash here is going to simply seek for somewhere to go. It doesn't go into money heaven. It's going to go into commodities, Dave. And there's why we're going to end up with a resource problem, because the worthless currency isn't going to be able to buy anything anymore. So this is the scenario that we're going to face, in of course a worst case scenario. But let me say this: I can't see a way that it's not going to end in a worst case scenario because world central banks are determined to keep the system functioning in this way, and it can't continue. You cannot. It was never meant to function in a negative rate environment. Never. And here in the United States, we have suppressed those rates for so long. We've allowed distortions to occur, like the stock market bubble, like inverse bubbles with regard to the precious metals, which are being absolutely manipulated. And this is not a conspiracy theory. We have banks admitting to it and paying fines. So you can understand where this is going to go. People are going to lose. You won't be able to go to work. You can imagine that everything will shut down. There'll be no credit. No credit. You'll have to have something in hand to get something. You won't be able to
people
function.
won't be able to use their credit cards at all.
No credit cards. The ATMs won't work. Businesses will not be able to borrow to function. This is where this can possibly go in a worst case scenario. Again, how can they avoid a worst case scenario if the system needs to borrow relentlessly from the future to sustain itself? Look at what we've done again, doubling the debt in 8 years. It took almost 240 years to build up the first half. We'll have to double that again. We can't do it. The debt-based model, they understand, is done, and they're doing everything they can to keep it propped up. And this has created an environment of risk, meaning people are throwing their cash at the stock market, inflating a bubble. We've seen this before. And then all of a sudden, bam, down it goes, and everyone's stuck holding a bag of dung. That's what's going to happen to them. And again, what does this mean? They're going to look to the government for a solution. The government will be more than happy to offer it some new system that I have no idea about. But I can promise you this is what they're going to do, and they're going to control every single aspect of your life. And I mean every single aspect of it.
So when you say a new system, you're talking about like a new currency, starting the system over again.
Absolutely. And who knows, we may end up with some type of a one world currency, a universal thing. I mean, I don't know what it's going to be. But the one we're in now is just not working anymore. We know this. And this is why they are so desperate to keep the price of gold and silver suppressed. And why they will continue to do it, why we're going to hear more banks coming out paying fines while the investors aren't made whole. And everyone's going to sit back like little sheep and do nothing about it. Who went to jail over the suppression of in Deutsche Bank? No one.
Nobody.
Nobody, and nobody ever will. This is the biggest joke of them all. And people always say, well, how come the bankers aren't held accountable? Because it's the confidence issue, Dave, that we spoke about. If they rattle if they start hauling in the big players of the big banks, okay, and start locking them up, it shakes confidence in the system, and the system collapses. This is why you will never see one of the higher ranking officers of one of these institutions to get arrested. They can do anything and get away with it. Anything. It's just the way it is. Look at Morgan Stanley. What's happening to them? Yeah, so their stock's taking a hit. Big freaking deal. You know what I mean? But did anyone other than the lower ranking people lose their jobs? Who went to jail over it? This is a crime. But it will never happen. And this is why no one was held accountable last time as well, when the whole housing bubble exploded. Let me just say this before we close. The housing bubble, the housing bubble was fostered by a government run amok. The government said, hey, it's everyone's God-given right to own a home. So let's allow the banks to give loans to anyone they want to. Doesn't matter what their credit score is. Doesn't even matter if they have a job. Let's just get everybody in the house. That inflated a bubble. When the government gets involved like this, it creates distortions, and that's what's happening now. But these distortions are much, much worse, Dave. And you had said earlier, maybe we'll see something as bad as last time. This will be 100,000 times worse than last time because there's no help unless they, again, start a new system. What's the Federal Reserve going to do? Print more cash out of thin air? Buy more bonds? What can they possibly do to the current system that they have not done already? If they could have fixed it, they would have fixed it by now.
Greg, thank you very much for being on the X22 Report Spotlight. Once again, how can people see your work?
Go to my website, traderschoice.net. Everything you need to see is right there.
All right, man. Thank you very much.